Thanks to all of you for being here today. During my many years as a faculty member at Columbia College Chicago, as a person helping to run the Story Week Festival of Writers, and now working with the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, it's been my distinct pleasure to meet many, many writers, and many of the greatest writers in this country and abroad. I could not begin to list them all, but I want to say that in our third year of this contest, which has come to be known as RAWA, that way you don't have to say my name all the time, I could not have more pleasure than to be in the room with these incredibly talented young writers. As you will show today, all of you, in your amazing work, you're already laying the foundation for being the great writers of Chicago's future. You're creating that future, and we're very proud of you for doing that. And don't worry, if you move away to go to college or something like that, some radical thing like going to college, we will still claim you. So there's a quote that's come down through the ages. It's attributed to various artists and writers, but most reliably perhaps to the great French poet Paul Valéry. Writing is not so much finished as abandoned. Writing is not so much finished as abandoned, meaning that there's always more work that can be done to a story or a poem. Writing is largely solitary work, and support, especially for developing writers, is crucial in keeping those drafts coming until the moment that they're able to be abandoned to the reader. Sometimes the hardest thing for writers is just to keep going. We live in an age of distraction, and for writers, distractions are ever present. They say that one mark of a writer is that they have a very clean house. It used to be that they had a whole bunch of sharpened pencils, but we've gotten rid of them. Another problem for writers is what I call the censorship monkey. The censorship monkey that sits on your shoulder, nattering away, saying, "You can't do that, you can't write about that." Or, "You shouldn't be reading books like that." Or, "That's a secret, you surely won't write about that." Or, "Why would you use language like that?" Our family, relatives, friends, neighbors never spoke like that, never used words like that. Those of us who seek to support the efforts of these young writers can do our part to clear out space for them to develop their imaginations and voice to the fullest, and more broadly, to oppose the stifling forces of book banning and thought policing. Instead, insisting that young writers, in fact writers and readers of any age, gain exposures to the widest possible array of excellent reading material, books that will feed curiosity and free the mind and voice. How appropriate that we gather today in this great library, where librarians insist that those principles be defended for the good of our democracy. And now we look forward to hearing the wonderful work from the winning young people.
I'm going to be reading the beginning of my short story called In the Modern World. America was no longer the land of freedom. Instead, it was divided into thousands of miles of rural land and a huge urban hubs called new cities. 30 miles away from the first new city, a girl sat on the stoop of her porch, arms wrapped around her legs. Mara stared blankly at the field where her family was harvesting peanuts. She looked past them at the shape of the new city skyline on the horizon. The loud clang of the dinner bell broke her from her thoughts. Maris's siblings came rushing to the door, and her dad walked behind them, giving Maris a tired smile. "Time for dinner, sweet pea. Let's go inside." He helped her up and followed everyone to the dining table. Mom ladled broth into bowls and placed half a loaf of bread on the table. Tanya took the last slice and gave Maris the heel. "Tanya, be polite. Take the heel for yourself and give your sister the slice," Mom hissed. "It's not like she's going to eat it," Tanya muttered. "Tanya!" Let her have it, Mom. I'm not hungry, Morris interjected. Fine, but you need to eat something, honey, Mom told her, touching her arm. Morris nodded and took a slow sip of broth. She hadn't been herself for weeks. Nia was gone. They'd been inseparable since birth. Nia's parents were peanut farmers, too. On the weekdays, Nia and Morris would walk together to the peanut processing plant to do their long work of monitoring the shelling machines and sorting out the defect peanuts in a long assembly line. A month ago, Morris had stayed home sick one day, and Nia had gone to the factory alone. She hadn't put up her hair, and when she leaned over the grinder, one of her braids got stuck. Morris heard that her head had gotten battered too quickly for her to be saved. She heard how some of the cleaners had to work an extra hour that night to clean the flesh and matted hair out of the machine. Morning didn't last long in the country. Families had to get back to work. Their livelihood depended on it, and for most, it was a welcome distraction. But after 4 days of mourning, when all the neighbors returned to the farm, Morris couldn't. She went through the motions, but her productivity dropped. She couldn't sleep and ate very little. Worried, her parents let her rest. Her mother sent Morris to bed after she continued to stare into her bowl blankly. She did as she was told, but stopped in the hallway when she heard her parents' voices dropping to a whisper. I don't know what we're going to do, Leonard. Last year's harvest was poor, and this year's crop is faring even worse. We need money for the winter. We have to send one of them to get a job somewhere else, in the city. It's our only option. You know how I feel about that. We don't have authorization. It's impossible. I got in touch with the contact your brother gave us. It's someone who can insert an identity chip. It's expensive, but it may be our only chance. Through the black market? Yes, but look, we need to be realistic. It's going to be a long, cold winter. The Hart's little boy died last year from cold exposure. We need to do everything we can to prepare. Mom was silent for a moment. I suppose you're right, but who would we send? I need to stay here to take care of the little ones, and you and Joseph need to stay to work on the farm. Tanya's 19. That's old enough to get a job. Morris thought of Tanya, boy crazy, snappy, with a bottomless stomach. She'd been looking forward to the Wheelers' barn raising later this month. She'd been fixing up one of Mom's old dresses for the dance afterwards. I'll go, Morris said, stepping back into the dining room. Morris, did you hear all that? Yes, let me go, instead of Tanya, please. Mom cast a worried look at Dad. Honey, Tanya's old enough to look after herself. The city is a whole new world. You belong at home. You're not ready for anything like that. But I am. I've always dreamed of getting out of the farm and seeing everything else out there. Tanya's never wanted to leave. She has so many friends, she'd never go willingly. I'll be 17 in the spring. Everyone says I look older than my age. Dad cupped Mom's hands in his. Maybe this is what she needs to move on from the tragedy. Mom turned to Morris, her brow creased. You know, if you leave, you might not be able to come home for months, maybe years. And there's no guarantee we'd be able to keep in touch. You'd be by yourself. Yes, and I still want to go. Dad stood up and walked across the room to hug Morris. You're braver than anyone I know, Sweet Pea, he continued. He continued, talking to her mother. She could be ready to go in 3 days. I'll pass the word along in the morning. Morris's mom watched them, her chest growing heavy like a stone had been dropped down her throat. Morris hugged her dad back, feeling alive for the first time in weeks. Thank you.
Toddlers are very unobservant. Of course, when you're learning how to be a human, analyzing your environment is a complete waste of time. You have more important things to do, obviously. I've been here a little while, so my eyes have wrinkled just enough to see the crack in the cement. I know to step to the side so that I do not fall. My cousin, however, only has 2 years in her past and trips. Within seconds, her knee has formed a cauldron spilling out red, and crumbs of the gravel have clutched to her skin. We all know the feeling. It stings. She looks at me as if to say, "How dare you?" How dare you let me fall? Now what would anyone do in this situation? They would console the child. They would take her hand and say, sana, sana, colita de rana, si no sana hoy, sanará mañana. In English, it sounds odd. Heal, heal, tail of a frog. If it doesn't heal today, it will heal tomorrow. I promise you, it's slightly more normal in Spanish. But it is an odd chant. It's also a lie. It may not heal tomorrow. It may not heal in 2 days or 3. It may never heal. Well, it is a skinned knee, and a short recovery time is realistic in this situation. But nonetheless, at 2, we've begun teaching her that her pain isn't worth time. We have taught her that her pain is something to be silenced. It's worth 1 day, 2 at most. Her pain is what will be mocked by men and dismissed by doctors and tolerated by herself. Pain is to be shunned. Pain is to be shushed. So naturally, pain is female. Pain is female. She used to have long hair, but she pulled most of it out. She does that when she's nervous. Her lanky fingers crawl under her calloused palm and pull until the dark strands have woven themselves through her hand. She pulls until she can reach up and feel her reddened scalp bite back at her touch. Pain can't stop pulling. Pain chips off the red paint so she can bite off her once ruby nails. They end in ridges that scratch, so no one is surprised to see the lines stretching across her arms. The scrapes run between blotches and burns and scars that should have calmed themselves by now, but she kept scratching and woke them back up. She scratches slowly, drawing in her knuckles to sink the toothed edges of her nails deep into her skin. Pain can't stop scratching. She tries not to scratch her face. Between the tip of her jagged nose and the edges of her cracked lips, pain traces the smile lines she somehow acquired without smiling. Smiling hurts. It makes her lips split and bleed, and it shows her teeth. Half of her teeth have surrendered themselves to amber. The other half fell out when they punched her because they wanted her to shut up. Pain can't shut up. A sharp pang draws Pain's hands to clutch her gut. She recognizes this feeling. Frustrated, her fingers tense and grab her blouse. It's relieving to tear something other than her own skin. Her nails rip just enough at the fabric to reveal slivers of her stomach. It bulges out, reaching to carve its name into her mirror. She covers it with her arms, but with nothing left to cover her arms, she tries to remember how to form tears. Pain can't cry. What can Pain still do? Kick, claw, scream. It's easy to point at Pain. She's too distracted by everything wrong with herself to point back. It's easy to point at Pain's kicking and clawing and screaming and say, she did it, she can't handle it, she's too weak. It's easy to point at Pain's blood-lined gums and sewn shut eyes and still forming scabs. It's easy, too easy, to blame Pain. Pain is what we'd call a nuisance, or what we with worse etiquette would call a bitch. By now, my cousin has run out of tears. Her knee has healed quickly. Her pain has become used to skinned knees. Someday, more than just the knee will be skinned, and she will be easy to point at and blame. She will be easy to dismiss and diminish. But the truth is, her pain is worth days, her pain is worth weeks, her pain is worth years. Even if it doesn't heal today, if it doesn't heal tomorrow, we must let her cry. We must let her kick and claw and scream. Our pain is not a nuisance, and neither are we. Sana, sana, colita de rana. Me quedaré con vos si no sana hoy, me quedaré con vos si no sana mañana. Heal, heal, tail of a frog. I will stay with you if it doesn't heal today. I will stay with you if it doesn't heal tomorrow. Thank you.
L'Hopital's rule. Algebraic slope defined as y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 describes the average rate of change over a finite area. However, taking the limit of 2 points getting infinitely close to each other, limit of h goes to 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h produces either a constant or an expression representing an instantaneous rate of change that holds true for the entire function. This is where derivatives come from, the tendency towards oblivion, discovering what remains as limits are reached and patterns are rewritten in terms of 0 and infinity, everything familiar redefined beyond recognition. I understood this somewhere in the skin of my teeth and the crevices of my palm before I could even speak fluent English. I first started to think that my body wasn't mine when I was 8 years old in a Beijing college dorm. My mother, her parents, and my sister lived together in a one-bedroom apartment provided by the university at which my mother was a professor. My Lao, a retired math teacher, would watch the same TV program every week before dinner. Despite the health show being mainly aimed at elders, I'd memorized the preceding liquor and children's medicine ads. But that day, the show introduced a patient who was born with her legs fused together. Aya, the young makeup host gasped. How does she live? She corrected, noting that the toddler in the purposely horrible, sensationalized photograph had been alive. Surgeries, a guest doctor pronounced eagerly, rubbing his hands together. So many knives and stitches, but she'll always be a lump of flesh from the waist down. 6 months later, my grandparents found me compulsively hunched over the cold metal bed frame at midnight, compulsively spitting saliva into a corner of the makeshift mattress made from blankets layered on bubble wrap. This was because I knew that my body could kill me. 我要抽你，敲你, I'll whip you, I'll knock your head in, my grandfather used to scream whenever I made a mistake. That day, however, the utter incomprehensibility of my neuroses earned me a trip to the doctor, who, just as befuddled, prescribed a box of the very same children's medicine advertised before the health show. Within 3 years, my Laoye died of lung cancer. My mother said, I can't tell my 90-year-old grandfather back in China. He'd die of heartbreak. In the oblivion of my mind, my Tai Laoye still believes in a man who doesn't exist. Derivatives are also a way of losing information, reducing the xy position of a function to its instantaneous slope. I wonder if, I hope, that like calculus, writing creative nonfiction is perhaps more about significance than memory. Significance derived from forgetting, because years later I don't remember anything about Beijing except for that my Laoye would smoke at the one window down our hallway, that I never finished that box of children's medicine, that I would rather have shut up and gone to school with a 40 Celsius degree fever than complain. That was when everything was dying. Perhaps nothing mattered. In other words, I am a coward. All I really have of Beijing now is a small powder pink album of washed out photographs falling apart at its binding. In each picture, I am smiling blankly in all directions, the flesh of my 4'11" stature flattened into impersonal pixels. But photos, like derivatives, exchange experience for appearance. And years after I moved back to the American Midwest, I continued to believe in what doesn't exist. I continued to know that my body was not mine. Laying in my bed, the walls the same watered-down pink as that dying album, feeling pinpricks of invisible hands and an invisible gaze crawling through the suffocating suburban darkness. I gathered proof of reason like shredded remnants of two disparate photos I needed to piece into one. But nearing the very edges of oblivion, the days when I spent hours staring at the ceiling, trying to sew explanations from impossible logic, from the thoughts so strong I could barely breathe, I knew, sullenly and secretly, that at the extreme periphery of my perception, the worst of what I believed in had to be real as the fear it caused. Not all limits immediately make sense. When limit as x goes to c of f of x over g of x reduces to 0 over 0, considered in indeterminate form, the derivative is unfinished. In this case, L'Hopital's rule stipulates that taking the derivative of f of x and g of x, limit as x goes to c of f prime of x over f g prime of x, will result in the true limit. That is, forcing together the photograph, removing information until the bigger picture is something mathematically acceptable, computable, tolerable, only at the end of it all. Some limits will always be reached. If not now, then eventually. There's one oblivion I imagine so often it has almost become memory. In it, I am still a coward, but I am a saint instead of a girl. Maybe it's 2019 this time. Let's say November, the Navy Pier, a weekend trip. Let's say the Lake Michigan breeze through the driver's window. Limit as X goes towards infinity, oily smoke sighing from the squeal of metal against metal railing. Everything I ever knew about myself would be true, and nothing about that would matter as the sun met its watery red-ringed reflection at the shoreline. 0 over 0.
Directions. If you take Parson Road for 3 miles past fields of corn, cows, and soybeans, take a right once you see the oak tree split by a lightning storm 12 odd years ago, and follow the path as it winds and twists till you can't remember which way you came from or where you're trying to go, then stop, declaring yourself well and truly lost. Then you are likely to find yourself standing in front of a signpost, tall and wooden, with rough-cut arrows pointing down more spindly paths. Dark paint gives a label to these directions: this way to here, that way to there, left turn for what was, and right turn for what will be. Ultimately, it does not matter which road you take, they all lead to a place, and the longer you walk on them, the stranger that place becomes. You can follow the path for as long as you want, but straying off to other trails may give your journey an altogether more sinister taste. Keep walking, don't stop. You'll be tempted by strange trails and stranger tales, and you will meet those who wish to accompany you on your journey. Trust these friends, but also trust that they will leave you in turn. This is not their road, even if you have the same final destination. As you travel, the hills will get steeper, and the trees will get thicker, and you'll feel yourself wanting to give up. It'll be too long, too hard, and every step you take will feel like you're wading through a rushing river. But the further you walk, the stranger the sights and scenes will become. The apples and nuts you gather will become richer and more satisfying, and every drink of the cool, clear water that flows through the streams feels like drinking a breath of fresh air. You'll find yourself feeling stronger as well. The miles and miles you've walked and the holes in your shoes a testament to how much you've grown. And you'll find yourself pausing, stopping to take in sunsets, lingering for a harvest festival or two, savoring the open road before you reach your final destination. The path becomes a traveling companion of sorts, and what has seemed strange and terrifying becomes comforting and familiar. You'll meet others as your paths cross, and you'll find yourself thinking how young these travelers are. Their fresh shoes and eyes wide with wonder and terror, begging for directions in the unfamiliar landscape. You'll help them the best you can, marveling at the fact that you yourself were once one of these bright-eyed wanderers, marveling at the mysteries of their road. And it's a natural instinct to want to take those young and naive under your wing, to lead them through the forest. But you must remember that while you can walk alongside for a while, eventually their paths will diverge from yours, and you will not be able to walk their road for them. It's hard to let go, especially as you find your legs weakening, your feet aching, your steps labored. You're getting tired, traveler. You're beginning to realize that no road goes on forever. And then, finally, after much toil, the road stops. The path you've traveled for so long ends in an instant. And then it's then that you realize that you've done it. You've completed your journey. You've walked the path. You found yourself at the end of the road. Now it's time to prepare. You empty your pockets, spilling out acorns and interesting stones. You can't take any of it with you. You set down your satchel, hoping someone else will find it and be able to use it on their own journey. The cool wind blows across your face as you take one last look at the woods. You've stepped out and gripped by the desire to run back into the forest to find your feet back on familiar ground, but you know you can't step back on the path. There's nowhere left to journey to. So welcome, traveler. Welcome to the end of your road. I hope you enjoyed the journey.
I'll be reading my poem, What the Tea Leaves Tell Us. The end is soft and sunlit. Time uncoils and settles once we've stopped running from it. She lopes forward, a dog leading on our heels and knees. The dust might swirl and sink while we sleep. The end brings the slow unwinding of muscles when the warmth seeps down to our bones, where the rot has been swept away and aired out along the ridges of our spines. We open the windows and watch it come for us. The end finds us curled on a blow-up mattress, 7 years old. Someone has left the door open to the late morning. Someone has let the air hang heavy with lavender and light gilded green. It has never left us. The end lifts us into its arms like a child falling asleep on a car ride home. It carries us up and cards its hands through our hair, kisses our foreheads. We are left to stare at the skyline past the bridge and the brownstones, awake at midnight with our too long sleeves. The end is here. Do you see it on the horizon? It only brings peace. Thank you.
Great.
This is Sundance Opulence. Why you continue to live in brokenness is a question that can only be answered by feeding on fireworks. Why we are derivations of the same answer, spoon-fed, swallowed, and shoved into dry throats, is an isometric motion. A contusion of chess pieces against skin, and the 180 degrees that make up the torrent of a circle. She will never find you in places you don't exist. So break off your ribs because this is your body, and write on your palms because she is your blood. So do this in remembrance of me, of us, of the moonshine that pours out when you're punched. Will he forgive you? Will he take the derivative until the letters line up right enough to hold up, to add up? We can't remember whether we burn or sing when we're hit with a hand open with the preface of a promise that is a prophet. With one blind eye and a tongue split in two. 3 days later, he rose, sick and twisted, and said, "We will love before we understand." 4 years later, my spine is inflamed, and my bones are made of calculations that I can't wake up enough to even solve. 5 months after, temperatures rise, and the heat has died, before Sundance can open its mouth and check if we are 180 degrees combined together. Thank you.